So when you face tribulation in this life, then there's an opportunity for generating more consciousness. When you encounter life's difficulties, there's an opportunity for developing more consciousness, and as you rise in consciousness, the transcendent dimension of awakened consciousness comes in. You begin to transcend the very problems that before you seemed unsurmountable. You transcend them, or you live with them and they are no longer that important. So you can transcend them internally. Let's say you have a body that is disabled in one way or another, and the problem then, as you awaken spiritually, sometimes it happens that the body gets healed, and at other times it happens that the transcendent consciousness arises and the disability of the body is no longer a source of suffering for you. But it was a source of suffering probably for quite a long time, until a very deep surrender happened. And in this deep surrender, you transcended this source of suffering. And then you still have the same body, and yet you're no longer psychologically suffering because you have transcended. So many things in this life, they can be, you can overcome an obstacle, or you can transcend an obstacle. If you overcome an obstacle when external things, you do external things in order to remove the obstacle, to get beyond it. If that is not possible, then internally you transcend, so it no longer, the obstacle, the so-called obstacle is still there, but it doesn't matter anymore to you. It is no longer so. In fact, you may be grateful for it. I describe I believe in the New Earth, when I was a student, I learned something from observing the famous scientist Stephen Hawking, who happened to be at the same college as me in England. And every time at lunchtime I would see him next to the table that I was at with friends. He was not famous at the time, it was a long time ago. He was in a wheelchair, unable to move his arms already, unable to put food in his mouth, unable to speak except make croaking sounds. Later he had a machine that he could use for communication. At that time he just could make croaking. He was already a professor, and at first I didn't know who he was. I asked him, who is this person? He was being fed by his graduate students would feed him food, and he would sit there and go, what a horrible fate. If you are unhappy, think of a fate like that, to be burdened with a body like that. I can't imagine anything worse. And then a great lesson was when I saw him once or twice, especially a first occasion. I opened the door for him, and he came in at the same time. He came in with his wheelchair. I opened the door and I looked into his eyes, and he looked up at me. And then I saw he was not suffering anymore. There wasn't a psychological suffering entity. There was just an acceptance. So although he may not have gone deep into spiritual awakening, there was an enhanced ability to use his mind. I believe he had some spiritual awakening, but he used his mind a lot. His mind was still active. If he had reacted against his condition, he would not have achieved anything. His ability to think creatively would have diminished. But through his acceptance, he was in touch with that deep power out of which intelligence arises. And so he was free of, there was not a suffering personality there. So that again is an example of transcendence, transcending something that before was a seemingly impossible obstacle.